Hey everyone, and welcome back to the next episode of the PTG Rail Routes Learning series. On today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at the recently released Intercity APT, or Advanced Passenger Train, and I'm going to be driving this in a scenario which comes with the train called Northbound Fun, on a full northbound run of the West Coast Mainline over Shap route, which is actually a non-stop journey with a total distance of around 90 1/3 miles. You will notice, of course, that I do have the track and vegetation upgrade installed on this route, which you saw a couple of weeks ago when I released my latest Pacer video, which was done on a small section of this route. And so if you would like to download the track and vegetation upgrade for the West Coast Mainline over Shap route, then I will post the link to where you can do that in the description of this video. You'll also notice that I actually sound a bit different in this video, and that's because I've just invested in a new microphone, which I really hope will increase the overall audio quality of the commentary which I give with these videos. So the train that I'm driving is the Intercity APT-P, which is the Advanced Passenger Train, as already mentioned, which was in service in the 1980s and was sadly a short-lived project for British Rail. The West Coast Mainline upon which these trains ran has a lot of curves which are always a barrier to high-speed rail operation, and as a result the APT was designed as a tilting train, with the whole train able to tilt up to 9 degrees on curves, thus allowing for faster running. The tilt was quite sudden, and a number of the early passengers actually complained of motion sickness as the train was rounding curves. When the trains first entered service, the press saw it as a great opportunity to attack British Rail for their perceived incompetence, and thus attacked every little flaw that they could find with the train, no matter how big or small. After a number of technical fixes, the trains were reintroduced in 1984 without fanfare and not even being mentioned in the working timetable. Passengers only knew that they were travelling on an APT when they arrived for their journeys. By this time, the political will to build and maintain the rest of the fleet had evaporated, with only 3 trains actually produced, and so the trains were quietly withdrawn from service in 1986, and broken up and sent to different museums in 1987. The trains had a maximum design speed of 155 miles per hour, which we will be able to get up to on this journey today, though their regular in-service speed was 125 miles per hour. It would actually be another 15 years before the return of tilting trains onto the West Coast Mainline after the failed APT project, in the form of the Class 390 Pendolino, which is operated by Virgin Trains, and also the Class 221 Super Voyager diesel-electric multiple unit. Now in the cab of the APT, there's a few things that I'm going to do quickly to set up ready for departure. So the first thing I'm going to do here is to press Shift and M to insert the master key. And now that I've done that, I can move the reversing handle forward, and as I move the reversing handle forward, I then need to reset the AWS self-test sequence. And now that I've done that, I'm just going to wait a few seconds until we hear the C-ATP alarm go off, which I need to reset by pressing the E key, so I've just done that now. So C-ATP is a form of automatic train protection which is implemented on this train, and you can actually see there in the middle of the dashboard above where it says max speed 125 miles per hour, there's a little display there that will display the permitted speed in the cab that we're allowed to travel at, and it's this that allows us to go much faster than usual, even faster than the enhanced permitted speed limits of the Class 390 Pendolino. So even though it does say there in the cab maximum speed 125 miles per hour, I am going to be driving up to 155 miles per hour today, as the C-ATP system will allow me to do so. So now let's just take a quick look at some of the cab controls here. Down on our left hand side we've got the brake handle there, which is a 6-step brake. So I can just move that all the way to the release position. Then you've got initial apply, or step 1, and then you go step 2, 3, 4, 5 up to step 6 there, and then finally there's one step above that, which is the emergency position. Now if we continue around the cab, you can see there in front of us the AWS sunflower indicator, and also to the left hand side at the bottom is the brake cylinder pressure gauge, and so when those two needles are pointing to 0, then the brakes should be fully released. Now if we continue around here and we look around the cab further, you can see there we've got the speedometer measured in miles per hour, and I'm just going to press I now to turn on the instrument lights so that we can see that more clearly in this cab. Now let's continue down here. You can see in front of us there the throttle control, which in the APT is a 7-step throttle control. You can see there we've got up to step 7, and there's actually an 8th step, which is a boost step, and the control is spring loaded, so that if you're in step 7 there and then you want to use boost, you have to hold down the A key, because as soon as you let go of the A key, then in fact the control will spring back to notch 7 of power. Now just to the right hand side there of the screen above the C-APT reset, we've got the horn control, which is a 2-tone horn controlled with the spacebar and the B key. And so now I've shown you the horn and all of the cab controls here. I'm just going to press H to turn on the headlights to the correct position. And now we're pretty much ready to start and depart and head out towards Carlisle. So let's just take another quick look at the train here at Preston Station before departure. Departing away from Preston, the speed limit is currently 35 miles per hour, with around 90 1/3 miles to go to what I would normally say is our next and only stop, but actually we're not going to be stopping there, so we've got around 90 1/3 miles to go to Carlisle, with the scenario ending just north of Carlisle on a viaduct there. And so I'm just going to gently accelerate up towards 35 miles per hour at present, and then once we reach 35 miles per hour, I'm going to shut off the power and allow the train to coast until we're able to accelerate further. So I've just shut off the power for a moment, and the speed limit is about to go up to 80 miles per hour at this speed post here. I can accelerate up towards the new speed limit of 80 miles per hour once we've reached the overbridge that you can see coming up just ahead. So I'm now in full power to bring our speed up towards 80 miles per hour, and in a moment the C-ATP system will activate, which will indicate the current speed limit in the cab display that you can see just in front of us. The C-ATP system has now activated, and so we've now got an assigned speed of 80 miles per hour, and we're just about to reach 80, so as we do reach 80 I'm then going to shut off the power to allow the train to coast. We now have a new assigned speed of 155 miles per hour, which is of course our maximum speed for this journey today, as we're passing Oxhay's Upgoods Loop on the right hand side. You can now see a J has come up on the C-ATP cab display there. I believe, if I remember correctly, that the J indicates there is a diverging junction coming up ahead. and that diverging junction will actually be for Barton and Broughton down goods loop. We're now passing Barton and Broughton down goods loop. The section that I did in my recent Pacer video was between Preston and Lancaster, which is the first station that we come across heading in this direction, to a junction just north of Lancaster where the Morecambe branch diverges. Though I do realise that at this point we're now actually doing double the speed that I was able to do in that video in the Pacer, with a maximum speed there of 75 miles per hour. And as we're now reaching 155 miles per hour, I'm cutting the power handle back 2 notches there. So we're now in notch 5 of power, which should maintain our speed fairly close to 155 miles per hour. I do notice that with this train, unfortunately, it does seem to shake rather violently at times when we're on quite sharp corners. I'm not quite sure why that is, but I'm guessing it's to do with the physics system within Train Simulator. And we just passed Garstang neutral section there. I should have actually cut the power, but the traction power red light on the dashboard display there did go out just for a brief moment, indicating that we passed the neutral section. Another thing that I notice is that on the curves, in reality, the trains were limited to a maximum tilt of 9 degrees, but on some of the curves that we go around on this journey, the tilt certainly seems to go a bit more than 9 degrees on those curves. We're now crossing Wyre Viaduct. Now passing Bay Horse crossovers. We're now passing Ubeck goods loops, and in a moment the speed display is going to indicate a drop in the speed down to 75 miles per hour, which is going to be 1.5 miles from the limit itself. So we've just got the warning there. So just press the E key, I've cut the power back, and I've now got the brakes currently in step 2, though I will increase as we get a bit closer to that speed limit. So we're now passing the 75 mile per hour Morpeth board, which is 1 mile from the limit itself. I've upped the braking as high as step 4. In fact, I'm upping the braking a bit more as I'm not sure we're going to slow down quite quick enough here. So that's bringing our speed off quite nicely. We're now down to 90 miles per hour. I think I can see the 75 mile per hour speed board just coming up. So it looks like we're going to slow down just right here. I'm just going to bring our speed down there just a bit below 75, as I know that we're going to be on a downhill gradient on this curve. Slow down maybe slightly more than I intended. And so at this point we've got a down 1 in 99 gradient, which should bring our speed up a little. We're now passing Lancaster Station with around 69 miles to go. The speed limit has just jumped up to 90 miles per hour, so I'm starting to accelerate up towards that now. And we're now coming up on Loon Viaduct. Just after crossing the viaduct there, the speed limit is now 125 miles per hour. The Morecambe line is now diverging to the left here, and we're now just coming up on a neutral section, so in a moment I'm just going to cut the power for that. The speed limit has now just jumped up to 155 miles per hour. I've just reached the neutral section there, and now that we've passed the neutral section, I can now increase the power to accelerate up towards 155 miles per hour, though there will actually be another 125 mile per hour speed limit, which is coming up fairly quickly now. So we've now got a warning for the upcoming 125 mile per hour speed limit. I've just reset the ATP system there. I've now got the brakes on to bring us down to 125. The 125 mile per hour speed limit comes into force at a 110 mile per hour speed post, which is coming up in a moment. We're now coming up on Carnforth Yard, followed by Carnforth Station, where the Cambrian, or should I say Cumbrian coastline diverges. The speed limit has now gone back up to 155 miles per hour. As we now approach 155 miles per hour, I'm once again just going to cut the power back here to notch 5 of power, which should hopefully maintain us close to that speed, though I will adjust the power if we end up gaining or losing too much speed. At some point along here now we're going to get a warning for a 125 mile per hour speed limit, which is 1 mile from the limit itself. And so once the C-ATP display changes to 125, I will reset the alarm there, I will shut off the power, and then I will apply the brakes up to step 3 braking, which should bring our speed down in time. So we've now got the warning for the upcoming 125 speed restriction. I've shut off the power. I've got the brakes into step 3. I'm slowing down quite nicely here. The 125 mile per hour speed limit comes into force at the next speed post, which is also 3/4 of a mile from an upcoming 115 mile per hour speed limit, which comes into force at the following speed post. I'm just going to allow the train to coast for a moment, and I will apply the brakes if necessary to ensure that we're down to 115, but it looks like that because we're on an uphill gradient, the train's actually managed to slow down to 115 in time. So we're now doing 115 miles per hour. I'm just going to apply a little bit of power to ensure that we don't lose too much speed. The 115 speed limit has now just come into force. The speed limit has now just jumped back up to 125 miles per hour at this point, with 54 miles to go through to Carlisle. As we're now doing around 125 miles per hour, I've just cut the power handle back to try and ensure that we don't end up speeding here. There's a few gradient changes along here affecting our speed, so I'm just trying to adjust the power handle to respond to them. I see we have now dropped down to 120 miles per hour. And now we've got a warning for an upcoming 100 mile per hour speed restriction, so I've just idled the power. Now I'm going to brake lightly to bring our speed down to 100 miles per hour. With the speed restriction coming into force at the 90 mile per hour speed post, which is coming up in a moment. So now I've just released the brakes at 100 miles per hour to try and ensure that I don't end up slowing down too much. Now I'm just increasing the power just to try and ensure that we don't lose too much speed here, as our speed has fallen down towards 95 miles per hour, and we're now coming up on Oxenholme Station. The speed limit's just gone up to 105 miles per hour, so I'm just increasing the power here to bring us up towards that. And then once we're doing 105 miles per hour, I need to go between notches 2 and 3 of power to try and maintain the speed. Now got a warning for an upcoming 100 mile per hour speed limit, so I've just cut the power back there. I've just allowed the train to coast down to 100, and then once at 100 miles per hour I need to be going up as high as notch 3 of power to try and maintain the speed here, as we're on an upward gradient of 1 in 106. Actually lost a little bit more speed there than I'd like, so I'm just increasing the power slightly to bring us back up towards 100 miles per hour before cutting back to notch 3. We're now coming up on Grey Rig goods loops, and the gradient here is going to shallow, so I've just cut the power back to ensure that we don't end up speeding. And then I will increase the power in a moment to try and maintain the speed. And here we've got a message which says, "Hello driver, it's the guard speaking. I'm calling to inform you that the brakes on the power car are running hot, and so we should do an inspection at T-Bay." And so T-Bay is coming up shortly. We're actually around 5 3/4 miles from T-Bay at this point. And so apparently we're responding, "Okay guard, message received and understood. That's just what we needed." Driver seemed a little excited there in that message. I'm not quite sure why. I now need to go between notches 1 and 2 of power to maintain us at around 100 miles per hour. I observe here that we now have a double yellow signal, and with that signal there was a 100 mile per hour post immediately afterwards, which actually means that we've now got around 3 miles to go through to T-Bay. The speed limit has just gone up to 115 miles per hour, but I'm unable to accelerate due to the adverse signals. Indeed, if this signal is single yellow, then I'm going to have to brake. In fact, it was single yellow and it's just jumped up to double at this point. I'm just going to allow the train to continue to coast along here for a moment, and we'll use the brakes as we get closer to T-Bay, or indeed if we pass a single yellow signal. We've now got a single yellow signal. I've now got the brakes on to bring our speed down. I've now got to assume that the next signal is displaying a red aspect until I can see otherwise, and so I need to be going slow enough to be able to stop within sight distance as I see that signal. The APT actually has a very good braking system. It's called hydrokinetic braking. I'm not quite sure how it works, but I am aware that it's certainly very good, and it allows the train to slow down in roughly the same time as a conventional train travelling at a slower speed, even though we've got much higher speed limits within this train. So we just passed a 105 mile per hour speed post, which is 1 mile from T-Bay itself. I can now see the next signal, which is displaying a yellow aspect, and we need to stop here at the following signal, which is the stopping point for our inspection. I also note here that the speed limit has just jumped up to 120 miles per hour. Of course, we won't be able to travel at that at present. So I'm just going to bring our speed up very slightly as we get closer to the next signal. I will then start using the brakes to bring us to a stop in the correct position. I can now just see the next signal in the distance there, which is displaying a red aspect, which is quite helpful as that is our stopping point. I've now got the brakes on lightly just to bring our speed down further. I'm now going to release the brakes just until we get closer to the AWS ramp here, and then apply the brakes once again to bring us to a stop in the exact position. Looks like that the train to our left was actually the one that we've been following for a few minutes. Now it's been put out in front of us, and so we're going to be following that for a little while, resulting in several more adverse signals yet. In the meantime, this should be just about the right place to stop. I've just cut down the wait time here at T-Bay a little bit, and now we've got the message saying that we can depart, saying hello driver, just to let you know that the brakes have cooled off and you may proceed when ready. So as you can see, the signal is now green. The train ahead of us has gone quite a bit ahead, and hopefully we won't catch it up too quickly here. Departing away from T-Bay, the speed limit is currently 120 miles per hour as indicated on the C-ATP display there. And we still have 37 miles to go through to Carlisle. So I'm now in full power, comfortably accelerating up towards the speed limit, and we should be able to get up to 120 miles per hour along here. And now about to be going up the Shap incline, which is quite a few miles here at around 1 in 75 on a climbing gradient, which will affect our ability to accelerate. The speed limit has now jumped up to 125 miles per hour, and of course, bearing in mind that we are following another train, I am trying to keep an eye out on the signals ahead so that I can respond should we receive an adverse signal aspect. The in-cab display is now warning us of an upcoming 80 mile per hour speed restriction, which is around 1¼ miles from the limit itself. So I've just idled the power at this point and I've now applied the brakes into step 2, and I'm in fact now going to increase up towards step 4 just to ensure that our speed is down to 80 miles per hour in time. Slowing down possibly slightly too quickly there. So now just reducing the braking once again. And we're now down to around 80 miles per hour. At 80 miles per hour, I need to go between notches 2 and 3 of power to maintain the speed along here until we reach Shap Summit, which should be coming up very shortly. I do think I slowed down for the 80 slightly too quickly here, in fact. And in fact I did, with just entering the 80 mile per hour speed zone now, but it wasn't too bad all in all. I'm currently in notch 3 of power, which is maintaining us fairly comfortably at close to 80 miles per hour. And then in a moment we're going to reach Shap Summit, where the gradient will level out before we're going to start on a downward gradient of 1 in 125. The gradient has now leveled out, so I'm just going to bring the power back to ensure that we don't end up breaking the speed limit here. I'm now in notch 1 of power. And I will idle the power if our speed goes any higher, which it looks like it might, so I'm just idling the power for a moment just until our speed falls very slightly, and then I'll bring the power back up once again. Let's see, in fact we have a single yellow signal here. We didn't have a double yellow warning signal for some reason, but as a result of the single yellow I've now got the brakes on to bring our speed down and ensure that we don't end up going through a red signal. The speed limit here has now gone up to 125 miles per hour for the line speed, but we certainly won't be able to do that at this point due to the adverse signals that we're currently travelling under. I can now see that the next signal is displaying a yellow aspect, so I've just released the brakes. I'm going to allow the train to coast for a moment. If we pass this signal on a single yellow, then I'm not going to add any power due to the downward gradient that we are currently on, so the train will actually continue to gather speed a little. I see we've now just jumped up to a double yellow signal, so I'm going to give us a small amount of power to accelerate and bring us back up towards 60 miles per hour before shutting off the power once again. We've now reached 60 miles per hour, so I've just shut off the power here. And as already mentioned, the train will continue to gather speed very slowly up towards 70 and 75 miles per hour, though on this gradient it seems the train won't really get that much above 75 miles per hour. Of course, I'm constantly also checking the signals to ensure that I'm not driving too fast for the signal aspect. At this point I notice we're passing through what appears to be a closed station, though I'm not sure what station that was. So if you do know, can you please let me know in the comments, as I'd be really interested to know. And I don't actually remember noticing that station on this route when driving it before. It appears that the gradient may have shallowed for a moment, as I noticed that we actually have lost some speed just a little bit below 60 miles per hour. But it looks like it may be on the increase once again. Our speed has now climbed up above 60 miles per hour, and so we're back on the downward gradient. The speed will continue to increase. Now coming up here on Harrison's down loop, the speed limit is dropping to 95 miles per hour at the end of this loop. Say at the end, in fact it appears that it's just dropped to 95 miles per hour there, around halfway along the loop. And we didn't get a warning for that, I think possibly because we're already so much under the speed limit, though I'm not 100% certain on that. As the signal there has just jumped up to green, I'm going to increase our speed slightly, although I'm very sure that we're going to reach another adverse signal coming up very shortly. Just shut off the power there between 80 and 85 miles per hour, as that signal was a double yellow that just jumped to a green, and so I'm not going to accelerate any further along here at this point until I know what aspect the next signal is displaying, which I can see is currently a cautionary aspect. The speed limit has now just jumped up to 125 miles per hour, with 24.25 miles to go through to Carlisle. Having just passed a double yellow signal, I've just applied the brakes very lightly here, just to bring our speed down slightly. I will increase the braking once I see the next signal, if it's displaying a single yellow aspect. As the signal is double yellow, I've just released the brakes and I'm now once again going to allow the train to coast along here. We are still on a downward gradient of around 1 in 125, which should mean that we actually won't lose any speed at this point when coasting. I just saw there that the single yellow signal that we reached just jumped to double yellow just before we passed it, and so as a result of that I've just released the brakes and I'm going to allow the train to continue to coast along here at this point. now have a warning for an upcoming 95 mile per hour speed restriction, and I believe that the structure we just crossed may have been Lowther Viaduct there. Sorry, correction, this is now Lowther Viaduct that we're crossing here. And so the speed limit is in a moment dropping to 95 miles per hour, though of course that won't actually affect us, as we're currently only doing around 70 miles per hour due to the signal aspects. We now have a diverging route aspect flashing single yellow signal coming up just ahead, and this indicates that we're going to be routed onto the rear platform at Penrith Station. And so this signal is around 1 mile from the following signal and just over 1 mile to go to an upcoming 25 mile per hour speed limit as we cross over a junction. We've now also got a warning here for an upcoming 75 mile per hour speed restriction, which is half a mile from the speed limit itself. We've now got the brakes on quite lightly, just bringing our speed down. Once we reach the next signal, we've then got around a quarter of a mile to go to the upcoming 25 mile per hour speed restriction. So you can see the signal coming up just here. The brakes are currently in step 2. And we've now got the warning for the upcoming 25 mile per hour speed limit. And now just going to reduce the braking for a moment, otherwise we will slow down a little bit too early. And I'll increase the braking as we get closer to the junction, which is just coming up. We're now down to 25 miles per hour just before crossing the junction here, and so we're going to be stuck at this speed for a moment until the speed increases to 30 miles per hour, and we're going to remain pretty much stuck at 30 miles per hour as long as we're on this rear track until rejoining the main line once again. Just given us a tiny bit of power as we were slowing down just a little too much, and now we're back to 25. I've just idled the power once again, and now just going to allow the train to coast until we can accelerate further. The speed limit has now just jumped up to 30 miles per hour, so I'm just going to use a very low power setting to bring our speed up towards 30. As the speed jumped to 30, we had around half a mile to go to the upcoming Penrith Station. I've now idled the power here at 30 miles per hour until we're able to accelerate further. And now we're approaching the platforms here at Penrith Station. Indeed, we're going to overtake now the train which was holding us up, which is currently on the right hand side on the down main. The speed display has now increased to 75 miles per hour, so I'm going to go straight up to full power to bring our speed up towards that now. At Penrith Station that we passed through a moment ago, we had 18 miles to go. The speed limit has now just jumped up to 140 miles per hour. The speed limit has now, for the final time, just jumped up to 155 miles per hour. And so this is the final section of 155 mile per hour running that we will have on this journey today. Once the speed limit went up to 155, we then had 15 miles to go through to Carlisle. We're now passing Plumpton Goods Loop on the right hand side. Once again, as we approach 155 miles per hour, I'm just going to cut the power handle back now to notch 5 of power, which should maintain us pretty close to that speed, but I will adjust the power settings if necessary. So we've now got a warning for an upcoming 125 mile per hour speed limit, which is 1 mile from the limit itself. I immediately shut off the power there and applied the brakes up to step 3, which should bring our speed down quite nicely. The 125 mile per hour speed restriction comes into force in a moment, just around the area as we pass a 100 mile per hour speed board. So you can just see that speed board coming up now. So as we entered the 125 mile per hour speed zone there, we had 6.5 miles to go through to Carlisle, and I'm now going to go between notches 2 and 3 of power to try and maintain the speed. Coming up shortly will be a warning for an upcoming 100 mile per hour speed restriction. As soon as we've received that warning, I'm then going to idle the power and brake into step 2, which should bring our speed down quite nicely for that 100 speed restriction. I've now idled the power, as I know that the speed warning will be coming up in a moment, and at this point we shouldn't lose too much speed. So we've now got the warning for the upcoming 100 mile per hour speed restriction, and I've got the brakes currently in step 2. As I've already mentioned, that should bring our speed down quite nicely. Once we enter the 100 mile per hour speed zone, we've then got just under a mile to go to an upcoming 75 mile per hour speed limit, and around 1.25 miles to go to an upcoming 20 mile per hour speed restriction. So we've just got the warning there for the 75 board at the Morpeth board there. I'm just now waiting until the cab display changes to update us of the upcoming 75 mile per hour speed restriction. As soon as it does so, I'm now going to brake up to step 3, which should bring our speed down quite nicely in time for the upcoming 75. And then as we enter the 75 mile per hour speed zone, we've then got around half a mile to go to the upcoming 20 mile per hour speed restriction. I did just increase the braking slightly there to ensure that we were slowing down quick enough. I've now just reduced the braking once again and left the brakes in step 3 here. So we've now got half a mile to go to the upcoming 20 mile per hour speed restriction, and the cab display has just updated warning us of that. The 20 mile per hour speed limit comes into force around the area of the next signal, and so we're slowing down maybe slightly too early. Now just reduce the braking for a moment. You can see the signal coming up just ahead. So the C-ATP system has now just ended, and I've now slowed down to 20 miles per hour in time. We've got quite a steep downward gradient here, quite short but quite steep, so I've slowed us down to 15 miles per hour to allow the train to coast back up towards 20, and then I will use the brakes for speed control if required to do so. So the Settle to Carlisle line has just joined us from the right hand side there, and on the left hand side the Cumbrian coastline has also joined us once again, which left us of course at Carnforth. Coming up just ahead is Carlisle Station. As already mentioned, the scenario is going to end just north of Carlisle Station. I'm going to allow the train to coast now all of the way through to the end of the scenario here. And because it's going to end while the train is moving, I'd just like to at this point say thank you very much for watching this video, and I really do hope that you did enjoy it. If you did, then please don't forget to like and subscribe, and also please don't forget that for the latest channel updates you can find me on Facebook with the link to my Facebook page in the description of this video. And also, if you'd like to sponsor anything towards the work that I do on this channel, then please visit my Patreon page for more information. Again, the link to that is in the description of this video. And also don't forget that the track and vegetation upgrade for the West Coast Main Line over Shap route, which is free, I've also put the link to the Facebook group where you will be able to download that. So once again, thank you very much for watching.